Destination, North Pole.
The North Pole.
North Pole.
Check out this newspaper article from 1913. Hope to solve Earth's final puzzle, icy Crocker Island. And then you see this map of like the North Pole, and right next to it, the theoretical location of Crocker Land, a lost continent that was supposed to be right next to the North Pole. This is the early 1900s. It's a time when the world map has been thoroughly explored and documented. There were just a few places that were still kind of blank. And this was one of them. The high north, an icy ocean that was incredibly difficult to get through. But people thought there was this North Polar continent, unexplored for now, but people wanted to get in on it. They wanted to see what was up here. And in fact, a couple explorers roaming around this area had reported seeing land up here. It created this frenzy, this wonder. Was there a lost polar continent up near the North Pole? I want to show you the story of how this all went down. It's the story of the explorers who decided to go into the most impossible terrain on Earth just to explore it. And it led to a passionate rivalry between these two dudes with big egos. It's full of fake photos and smear campaigns, and it was kind of like the space race of the day. A race to see who could be the first to get to the top of the world. Okay, so let's get up to speed on what we're talking about here. The Arctic is kind of anything above this line, but we should ditch this map. This is the Mercator projection, which I kind of have thoughts on.
Where the Mercator fails is its representation of size.
It massively distorts everything in the north and south, and it's just not going to be good for this story, so we need a better map. Check out this map. This one's way better. Watch. This beautiful map I have had for a very long time, and I'm finally going to be able to use it for a story. Look at that beauty! Man, this is just such a beautiful map. Just gorgeous. This is what we're gonna use to tell the story. This is the top of the world. Okay, the North Pole, the top of the world. Reminder that this is just one giant ocean. But the reason it looks like this is because it's frozen. You can't just like sail through it. And yet many explorers had this lofty goal. They wanted to reach the North Pole, the arbitrary place on our planet that's just a bunch of ice sheets sliding around, where all the longitude lines come together. The place that we just decided with math was the top of the Earth. You know, the North Pole, where Santa lives. That's what we're talking about. That is what the explorers wanted to like get to. So why attempt to reach an arbitrary bit of ocean that's super impractical and risky? Because it's there, dummy. We're humans. We don't ask questions like that. We just have to go. People had been trying to get up here for centuries, trying to figure out what they would find. Maybe if they got through the ice, there would be some warm water ocean here. Maybe there'd be new shipping routes over the top of the globe. By 1845, explorers were making custom ships. They were reinforcing the hulls of warships with thicker wood that could take on the pressure of the ice. And they would go and explore, and they didn't find any useful shipping routes, but they did find people. These people, the Inuit, knew a thing or two about how to handle the cold. They knew how to build shelters out in the ice. They made kayaks and parkas. They used dog sledges to get around. Oh, and these dog sledges are pretty cool. But let's not get distracted. That's for a totally different story that I'm doing on Greenland. The point is that these American and European explorers realized that any North Pole expedition with a chance of success would need to rely on Inuit guides. So it's the late 1870s, and we start to see the first serious attempts to finally reach the North Pole. Every attempt being its own version of crazy. Let me show you some of these. All of these little lines are different explorers and their attempt to get here, to the center, to the North Pole. And each one was insane. Like this guy who intentionally floated from Russia, got his boat stuck in the ice on purpose, and then let the ice, which is always moving around, sort of drift him around and carry him with the hopes that it would like carry him to the North Pole. But instead he just did these like sort of loop-de-loops and eventually got like spit out next to Svalbard. I mean, these guys were climbing like 30-foot ice ridges. They were facing off with polar bears, whose territory this is. I mean, these guys are out exploring in some of the harshest conditions ever in the name of adventure? Exploration? Like, that is why they were doing this. They became heroes for kids back home. But anyway, this is all just backstory. Our story that I really want to tell you about starts now, and it has to do with this guy, Robert Peary, Arctic explorer who is obsessed with getting to the North Pole. I mean, just look at Robert Peary's portrait. Peary was an American Navy engineer who was dead set on becoming famous, once writing a letter to his mother saying, quote, "Remember, mother, I must have fame." Like, that's who this guy is. He and his obsession with being famous is a huge part of this story. So Peary is out exploring the Arctic. He makes Greenland his hopping off point. That's sort of his home base. And on his second expedition, he breaks his leg. Luckily, in his expedition, he's got this greeny doctor who comes and helps mend his leg. And while his leg was healing, they stayed up in the Arctic for like 6 months. And during that time, this greeny doctor, Frederick Cook, learns a bunch of skills for surviving in the Arctic. He even starts picking up the Inuit language. Okay, so eventually Peary's leg heals and they head back down south. And Peary is like pretty impressed with the greeny doctor who's now learned all these new skills. He's like, "Wow, Cook, you're incredible. We'd love to have you on our next mission here in the Arctic." But Cook wasn't into it. He didn't want to be some footnote in history. He was feeling confident after his one expedition, and he decided to strike out on his own as an explorer. Peary was kind of like, "Okay, cool, Cook, like, have fun trying to be an explorer. You're like super ungrateful for everything I've taught you, like, good luck." And thus the seeds of tension were planted between these two. Old school Peary versus newbie starry-eyed Cook. Both with big egos and both willing to do what it takes to show that they were great explorers. So they go their separate ways. The newbie doctor turned aspiring explorer, Frederick Cook, sets out on his own expedition back to the Arctic, feeling super confident. Wait, no, this trip doesn't get any adventure music. It was a total failure. Like, they barely made it to here, and then they had to like turn back and abandon their ship and like, Cook. And Peary is like loving this. While Cook was getting owned in the Arctic, Peary continues to kill it as this engineer turned Arctic explorer who pines to be famous. He's busy going to Greenland and bringing back 3 giant meteorites. Who goes out on an expedition and comes back with meteorites, like from space? Peary, you're the real deal. He writes a book about his adventures and starts to get heralded as the greatest Arctic adventurer of their day. I mean, look at this face. This guy's kind of a badass. True story, I was in Greenland a few weeks ago and I tried to take a photo just like this. It didn't really work out. Okay, so back to Cook. He doesn't give up. He's slowly getting better at this whole explore the Arctic thing. He goes south to Antarctica and goes on another expedition that goes horribly wrong. But this time Cook is ready. He meets the challenge and he makes it out alive, leveling up immensely in the process. By 1898, Peary moves to Greenland, like kind of permanently, and makes his focus on getting to the North Pole. Like, that is his dream. He is training, he's recruiting people, and he starts to go out on attempts. He wants to be the first person to the top of the world. And this is where we kind of start to see Peary's true colors. Like, as much of a badass as this guy is, you do a little bit of research and you realize that he's actually kind of an asshole. And like, there's so much to say about this, but little sampler here. He brings back 6 Inuit to New York. 4 of them end up dying, and there's this whole insane story that you can read about in the citations. But yeah, he's not a great guy. He cheats on his wife with a 14-year-old and has a kid with her. And then there's this guy, his number 2, Matt Henson. Henson was like one of the best non-Inuit dog sled drivers in the world. He even learned to speak the Inuit language, something that Peary wasn't even able to do. But Peary described him as, quote, his assistant because he's black, and goes on to give him basically no credit for all of his achievements. So yeah, Peary's kind of an asshole, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't also an incredibly skilled, determined explorer. I mean, he stays up here for 4 years, refining his technique to get to the North Pole. He obsesses over gear and designs custom sledges, and even creates this like perfect water boiler. And he keeps going back, making attempt after attempt. And each time, some disaster occurs, and they have to turn back. In the process, he loses 8 toes to frostbite. But he keeps going. He gets closer and closer and finally decides that it is his time. So he builds this custom ship. He mounts a massive expedition and he goes out. And on what he hopes is his last expedition, he claims to have passed by a piece of land sticking out of the ice. This would later go on to fuel the idea that there's a continent up here. All these newspaper articles I was showing you about, like, is there a continent near the North Pole? But anyway, on this expedition, he still doesn't make it. The furthest he was able to get was here, just 200 miles from the North Pole, but he had to turn back. So wait, is that it? Is Peary giving up? He lost 8 toes to frostbite and he didn't make it to the North Pole? Wait, just pause on Peary for a second. We'll talk about what happens next. But first we gotta get back to this guy, Cook. What's Cook up to? Well, it turns out that Cook continued to level up, getting more and more experience, getting more and more famous. He goes to Alaska, trying to be the first to summit Denali, which is the highest peak in North America. And he comes off the mountain saying that he made it to the top. Whoa, Cook. We're no longer playing in the minor leagues. He's a legit explorer now. He's even elected as the president of the Explorers Club in New York. By 1906, he's kind of like a BFD in the explorer scene. And soon he's sitting in the bougie National Geographic Society dinner in Washington, D.C. A dinner that was put on to actually honor Peary for all of his Arctic explorations. Okay, so this is where it gets juicy and like the tension and drama really starts to like rise, because during this dinner, Alexander Graham Bell, the guy who invented the telephone, no big deal, he gets up and is like, yeah, Peary's cool and all. I know we're like celebrating him here in this dinner, but what about Cook? Let's hear from Cook, a man who's gone to the top and the bottom of the earth and the largest peak in America. So Cook gets up and toots his own horn at this dinner that was supposed to be for Peary. Peary must have been pissed at this moment. Like, this was his moment to shine. He was getting all this attention. And who's there? Cook, the guy who was like a grainy doctor who's now his rival, but who Peary considers as a hack, like not a real explorer. But now Cook is feeling good. He's no longer a newbie. So he sets his sight on beating Peary to the North Pole. The race is now on. So it's 1907 and Cook heads to the Arctic. He gathers a crew to go to the North Pole. There's one other Westerner, he's got 9 Inuits, and a dog sledge team for each. Peary was pissed at Cook at this moment for even attempting to be the first one to the North Pole. And to make things worse, Cook was using a bunch of Peary's techniques and recruiting Inuit that Peary had built relationships with. And doing this all just as Peary was about to head off on a final attempt of his own. So months go by, 6 months, and then 8 months. And now it's been a year and no one has heard from Cook. Is he dead? Who cares, says Peary. He's getting ready for his own expedition to the north. Teddy Roosevelt wishing him well on his way. And just like that, Peary and his crew are off, racing to the North Pole. Cook still out there somewhere, and the world wondering who will get there first. Newspapers start wondering, does he still live? It is a seesaw of doubt and hope. Who may have the story of finding the North Pole, or who may be buried somewhere in the snow and ice? Man, headlines back then were so cool. And then, on September 1st, 1909, on this little island in the north, a ragged Dr. Cook appears ashore. He heads straight to the telegraph station and sends this message. This is huge news. Cook says he reached the North Pole and that he found land up here in what a lot of people thought was just a frozen ocean. Okay, but wait, it's not over. Literally 5 days later, who shows up on the Labrador coast but freaking Peary? What? 5 days later, he sends his own telegram. And if the press wasn't already stoked enough about Cook having come back and discovered land and got to the North Pole first, now they're going berserk. This is so juicy. The great rivalry climaxing in this big 5 day. You could like make this stuff up. So they turn to Peary and they're like, oh, Cook arrived 5 days ago and said that he was the first one to get to the North Pole before you did. What? He did not just get bested by the cocky newbie that he trained. No, Cook is lying. Peary says. The rivalry between these two guys is hitting a crescendo, and the newspapers, their cartoonists, and their readers are all loving it. It leads to this waterfall of memes depicting the rivalry, which at this point was about ego, fame, money, reputation, all playing out in the epic Arctic. The Last Frontier. I mean, this should be like a miniseries on Hulu. Like, I would watch the hell out of this.
The true story of two very different men in pursuit of the same goal.
My favorite cartoon is this one. It's a puck cover showing the North Pole holding a bag of money with Cook holding a note saying, "I saw you first," and Peary holding a note saying, "So did I." Oh, it's so good. Oh, and Cook was super into like gumdrops apparently. Anyway, so now it's like full-blown information warfare between these two. Peary's going out on this like smear campaign to undermine Cook's credibility, saying that he's been lying about all of his accomplishments. He didn't actually summit Denali, says Peary. So then Cook fires back, revealing kind of his snarky side, reminding the world that Peary is this 52-year-old man with just 2 toes. Oh, and it's awfully suspicious that he didn't take anyone with him who could corroborate the latitude that he was at. Among all these memes and selling of newspapers and the public bickering, the questions still remain. Who actually got there first? Well, shouldn't that be easy? Why don't we just go to the North Pole? We can obviously go there now and see what flag is planted there. No, because remember, the North Pole is just a frozen ocean and the ice drifts like miles per day, so that won't work. The only way to actually prove who got there first is to review the evidence from these expeditions, the journals and the records that these guys kept, and then compare that against solid evidence. And to be honest, both these guys' accounts are full of weaknesses and weird stuff. Like, remember when Peary insisted that there was a landmass up here? Well, a later expedition went out and had this like horrendous experience of trying to look for that land, and they discovered that it was not there, that this was totally made up. Many think that Peary made this up in an earlier expedition to rally excitement to raise money for future trips. So what did that mean? Who actually got there first? Was everyone just lying about everything? Has the North Pole ever been discovered? Well, it would actually be decades of exploration, observation, and analysis before some clear conclusions started to emerge. For this story, we read through books written by scholars who have dedicated much of their professional lives to answering this question. And here's what we can finally say with some clarity. Peary probably made it to the North Pole on this trip. Academics have debated this, and most say that he came between making it like within 100 miles to actually making it dead center to the North Pole, just depending on who you ask. And while we're at it, it's also possible that Henson, remember Henson, the number 2 who didn't get any credit because Peary was probably racist, was actually the first to get there because he was the guy who forged the path for Peary to follow. Meaning it was very possible that the first person to step foot on the North Pole was a black man. Kind of cool. Okay, but what about Cook? Didn't he start his journey like almost a year before Peary? Did he actually get there first? No, Cook did not get there first. Years of research has revealed that Cook was a liar, like a full-blown liar. The furthest that he probably made it was like here, 400 miles off of the North Pole, aka he never actually traversed the really difficult portion in all of this. He made it far enough to be able to tell a convincing story, and then he headed back and sent this telegram saying that he made it there first. Whoa, Cook, okay. But at least he's like a legit explorer, right? Like, he summited Denali first. I mean, he had pics. Wait, no. Turns out these pics are not the top of Denali. They're actually shots from like 15,000 feet further down, aka not even the elevation of Denver, Colorado. Like, this was a total staged photo that he lied to the world about to say that he was the first one to make it to the tallest peak in North America. Cook was a liar. He had tricked the world, and many believed him. Wow. Okay. So, Peary was an asshole set on being famous, but at least he was a legit explorer who probably made it to the North Pole or close to it first. And Cook, seemingly a decent explorer, was actually just a much better storyteller and a full-blown liar. But this is kind of unsatisfying because we don't actually know definitively who was the first person to like touch their foot on the North Pole, which is like, why do we even need to know that? Why is that important? Because it is. No one gets the credit without needing to go into all of these caveats, and there's way more caveats than I've gone into here. Instead, this is a story of reputation manipulation and media blitzes, of controversy and debate, optics and lying. And instead of seeing a Neil Armstrong, we're left with more of like a couple of Elon Musk types. But I won't leave you there. Let's just say definitively who made it to the North Pole first with no asterisks. In 1926, Roald Amundsen, the man who had previously won the race to the South Pole, became the first to get to the North Pole, undisputed, by flying over it. So he didn't actually touch the ice, he just flew over it. But it wasn't until 1948 that a Russian was the first verified person to walk on the pole, like to actually put your boot on the North Pole. He took a plane to get there and then just walked on the North Pole. In 1958,
The USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine,
went under the pole, which was another first. And submarines are really awesome, and we made a whole video about them that you should watch. Then finally, the first undisputed person to reach the North Pole by land was a guy from Minnesota. It was essentially the culmination of a bar bet that got way out of hand. That's a whole other story. But yeah, it was 1968 and with a snowmobile. So it really gives you an appreciation of what Peary was capable of doing decades earlier using Inuit wisdom, his own clever inventions, and a lot of sled dogs. So today, the question of who got to the North Pole first is not really a question that most people are thinking about a lot when it comes to the Arctic. I went to Greenland a few weeks ago and have been reporting on the changing Arctic, exploring how different countries are vying for ownership and influence in this space because this frozen ocean won't be frozen for long. And now it's opening up to new shipping routes, new resources unlocked as the ice melts. But one thing that hasn't changed is how the media treats a story like this. A race, a rivalry, a public gossip fest with big egos hungry for attention, and especially when there's imagery to go along with it. I think we're all eager to believe what we see when it fulfills some deep need to witness the excitement of exploration. And today, the people who still want to be in the spotlight do so by bickering and boasting about how great they are. And the media still gleefully covers it all. Covering the lies, covering the deceptions, as long as there's a great story and a great image to go along with it. And sometimes that's fact-checked and the truth comes out, and sometimes we just never know. Wasn't this a nuts story? Isn't it just wild, these two characters and how it's not that much different from people on Twitter today? Anyway, this was another deep dive where we had so much stuff. And if you look at the info doc, which is our kind of research doc for this, it's literally hundreds of pages long. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this was a fun one for you. And yes, this map is permanently just up in my studio because I want to look at it every day of my life. Speaking of maps, let me show you something. I made a poster about maps and I'm very, very excited about it. It is called All Maps Are Wrong, and it is a display of a bunch of map projections, basically the mathematical algorithms that we use to take a spherical thing called the Earth and put it onto a flat thing called a piece of paper. This map kind of celebrates that. It has a little explainer in the middle that explains why we need to do this, and then it has a name of all of the map projections that are displayed on this poster. This is beautiful and cool and fun, and I've been wanting to design something like this for years. But it's also a way that you can help support what we're doing here. We're trying to make rigorous journalism on YouTube, not as a part of a big corporate entity, but just like us. And to do that, we more and more rely on our community to help us do it better and to be able to pour ourselves into these stories. And we kind of have a big team that helps us do this now. Our team is growing. In fact, speaking of our team, we publish an extra video every month that introduces you to the behind the scenes of what we do here. It is an intro to our team, to all of the people and the processes and the shenanigans of running this studio. That is available to people who are members of the newsroom, which is just what we call our Patreon. The newsroom is a place that supports us, but also gets you this extra video every month. It gets you access to scripts. You get royalty-free music that you can use. And it's just a fun community. I like post things there. Like I ask for help on thumbnails and titles. I get feedback. Every once in a while I do a Q&A with the community. So that is patreon.com/Johnny Harris. We have LUTs and presets that we use to color our videos and photos. We're publishing more courses over at Bright Trip, which is the travel startup that we started a few years ago and is growing. I think that's it. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for watching this video. We've got a lot more coming, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. What?
And go get your poster.
And go get your poster. And go get your poster. Should I reference Greenland? I'd be like, I just was up here. Like, I can't not be like, by the way, like.
No, it's not relevant.
Really?
You can say it at the end of the video.
We have all this footage. Can I not be like, keep me honest with Piri?